The morning of October 7, 2023, dawned like any other in Israel. Families prepared for the Sabbath, unaware that terror would soon shatter the peace. At 6:30 a.m., Hamas, the militant group controlling the Gaza Strip, launched a surprise attack. Thousands of rockets rained down on southern Israel, targeting civilians and military installations alike. Simultaneously, Hamas fighters infiltrated Israeli territory through tunnels and by sea, catching the nation off guard. The audacity of the attack shocked the world and plunged the region into chaos. The attack, meticulously planned and coordinated, exposed vulnerabilities in Israel's defenses. Hamas's objective was twofold: to inflict heavy casualties and to capture hostages, leveraging them for future negotiations. The day would forever be etched in Israel's memory as a day of infamy. Israel, reeling from the unexpected assault, responded swiftly and decisively. Within hours, the Israel Defense Forces, or IDF, launched Operation Swords of Iron, a full-scale military offensive targeting Hamas infrastructure and personnel in Gaza. Israeli warplanes pounded suspected Hamas targets, including weapons depots, command centers, and tunnels. Ground troops mobilized along the Gaza border, preparing for a potential ground invasion. Israel vowed to dismantle Hamas's military capabilities and cripple its ability to launch further attacks. The scale and intensity of Israel's response reflected the nation's determination to avenge the attack and restore its deterrence. However, the offensive also raised concerns about civilian casualties in densely populated Gaza, where Hamas operates within civilian areas. As Israel's offensive intensified, the humanitarian situation in Gaza rapidly deteriorated. The Gaza Strip, home to over 2 million Palestinians, was already grappling with poverty, unemployment, and a fragile healthcare system. The conflict pushed the territory to the brink of collapse. Israel's blockade of Gaza, in place since Hamas's takeover in 2007, tightened its grip. Essential supplies, including food, medicine, and fuel, dwindled, exacerbating the suffering of civilians trapped in the crossfire. Hospitals, overwhelmed with casualties, struggled to cope with limited resources and power outages. The United Nations warned of a humanitarian catastrophe unfolding in Gaza, with civilians bearing the brunt of the conflict. International calls for a ceasefire and humanitarian corridors to allow aid delivery grew louder, but a lasting truce remained elusive. Amidst the escalating violence, ordinary Palestinians and Israelis found themselves caught in a nightmare. In Gaza, families huddled in fear as bombs rained down, their lives upended by the relentless bombardment. Many sought refuge in UN shelters, only to find themselves facing overcrowding and shortages. In Israel, the constant threat of rocket attacks disrupted daily life. Schools and businesses closed, and residents sought shelter in bomb shelters. The psychological toll of living under fire took its toll, particularly on children who had known nothing but conflict. The conflict's human cost extended beyond the immediate casualties. The trauma of witnessing violence, losing loved ones, and facing an uncertain future left deep scars on both societies. The cycle of violence seemed endless, fueling hatred and despair on all sides. Section 5, A Year of Bloodshed, Key Events in the Conflict. The Israel-Hamas conflict, now in its second year, has been marked by a series of escalations and failed ceasefire attempts. Here are some key events that have shaped the conflict's trajectory. On October 7, 2023, Hamas launches a surprise attack on Israel, firing thousands of rockets and infiltrating Israeli territory. From October 7 to 10, 2023, Israel responds with Operation Swords of Iron, launching airstrikes and mobilizing ground troops along the Gaza border. On October 12, 2023, Egypt brokers a ceasefire agreement, but it collapses within hours as both sides resume fighting. Then, on October 26, 2023, an Israeli airstrike hits Al-Ali Arab Hospital in Gaza City, killing hundreds of civilians and sparking international outrage. Section 6. International response calls for peace amidst escalation. The international community has been deeply divided in its response to the Israel-Hamas conflict. Western powers, led by the United States, have largely supported Israel's right to defend itself against Hamas's attacks. However, they have also expressed concern over civilian casualties and urged restraint. Arab and Muslim-majority countries have condemned Israel's offensive in Gaza, accusing it of using disproportionate force. They have called for an end to the blockade of Gaza and a negotiated solution to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. the United Nations has called for an immediate ceasefire and humanitarian access to Gaza. However, its efforts to broker a lasting truce have been hampered by the deep mistrust between the parties involved and the complex geopolitical dynamics at play. Section 7. The weight of grief, loss, and trauma in Gaza and Israel. As the conflict grinds on, the human toll continues to mount. Thousands of Palestinians and Israelis have been killed, and countless more have been injured. The physical and psychological scars of the conflict will linger for generations to come. In Gaza, families mourn the loss of loved ones, their lives shattered by the violence. Children, who have witnessed horrors no child should ever see, bear the invisible wounds of trauma. The destruction of homes, schools, and hospitals has left deep scars on the social fabric of Gaza. In Israel, too, the conflict has left its mark. Families grieve the loss of soldiers and civilians, their lives cut short by rocket attacks and terror attacks. The constant threat of violence has created a climate of fear and anxiety, particularly among those living in southern Israel. Section 8. Beyond the rubble, rebuilding lives and infrastructure. Even if a ceasefire is reached, the task of rebuilding Gaza and southern Israel will be daunting. The conflict has caused widespread destruction, leaving thousands homeless and crippling essential infrastructure. In Gaza, the reconstruction effort is hampered by the blockade, which restricts the entry of building materials and other essential goods. The international community has pledged billions of dollars in aid, but disbursement has been slow and corruption remains a concern. In Israel, the government faces the challenge of repairing damaged infrastructure and providing support to those who have lost homes and businesses. The psychological scars of the conflict will also need to be addressed, with a focus on providing mental health services to those in need.